Okay. I have one mandatory moderator ReMA has asked me to prepare just before we get into, but in case anybody is unaware, this is the Eco Innovation. We are going to be talking about the next gen technologies in recycling. Obviously, there's been a lot of changes that has been happening in our industry over the past several years, and these experts are at the top of the game. They're at the forefront. They have a lot of knowledge in that world. I'm a bit of a geek, and I love talking about those types of technologies that are out there, and they're the ones that are going to be able to really talk about how to implement these technologies in your businesses, especially when it comes to growing your profit margins, where the pain points are, and really helping identify where you can grow with your business. First off, though, welcome to today's session. Thank you. Really appreciate it. All ReMA events follow ReMA's antitrust policy and code of conduct. Copies of the policy are available at your seat and on the ReMA website. When you entered the room, your badge was scanned. While scanning is not required, doing so does help ReMA to keep count on the number of attendees. And in addition, it will give you access to additional information after the convention. Please make sure that your cell phone is turned off or set to vibrate. Please make note of the emergency exits that are clearly marked with illuminated signs. Should there be an emergency, you will be directed to exit via the foyer areas of the convention center parking lots. Recordings, of course, I'm going to be making recordings, will be made available within the next 2 weeks. Visit the ReMA website for more details. The mobile app, ReMA Connect, is the best way to receive updates regarding the convention, connect with other attendees, and access the expo schedule. Do we have any members of the media joining us today? If so, please raise your hand. Thank you for self-identifying today. Finally, I'd like to thank our sponsors for their generous support. This particular session is brought to you by AMCS, so thank you for the generous sponsors for their support. Now, I'd like to turn the program over to myself, Jennifer Betts, the moderator for today on this panel, and get this kicked off. Today, I want to introduce you to 3 of our panelists. We have Geoff Aardsma. He is the VP of Marketing for the AMCS Group. We have Lisa Kagan. She is the co-founder of Buddy. And we have Blake Gordon of Georgia Pacific Recycling. The way that today's format is going to run, because we learned some things from last year, is that we're going to have each of these individuals introduce themselves, their background, and what they're working on at their companies. And then we're going to have about 40 to 45 minutes where I've got a whole bunch of questions to go over based on what we learned about last year's questions, because we ran out of time from your questions. And we want to leave about 15 to 20 minutes at the end for your questions. So that is the intent. We also are going to have a QR code up throughout the session. There are about 5 questions there that hopefully technology is going to work and allow you in real time to understand who is in the audience with you and where they're at on the technology journey with you. So throughout the presentation, you're going to be able to see who is in the room with you, where they're at, and understand a little bit more as we go through this. For those who do not know me, I will start. I'm Jennifer Betts. I'm the CEO of Magnar Metals. I've been in the industry a couple years. It was a late night. Couple decades at this point. I started off at the DJJ company, Nucor acquired. I went from non-ferrous to ferrous. I have managed EAF melt shop programs, integrated at AK Steel. In the past decade, I switched over to the consulting world. I help companies find new suppliers, consumers, as well as identify pain points in the technology world, as well as scout out for new companies. And I do a little bit of social media, digital marketing, and PR. Let's get started. Geoff, would you like to kick us off and introduce yourself?
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm testing the mic for the first time, so it sounds like it's working. Geoff Aardsma, I'm head of market development for AMCS North America. My role here is really to set the strategic direction for the solutions that we're bringing to the North American market, working with our global partners as we work in Europe and Australia, New Zealand heavily as well. My background is in solid waste and recycling. It's where I've spent my entire career, regulated waste as well. But really over the last decade, diving deep into the technology side of driving optimization, logistics, pricing excellence, and other types of solutions into the recycling industries broadly. With AMCS, we are bringing forth our performance sustainability solution suite, which is really focusing on an end-to-end group of solutions, not only focused in the yard or for pricing, but also a strong focus on asset maintenance, health and safety, and sustainability. So really excited to have the conversation, meet all of you here today. Thanks. I'll let you guys kick off.
Wonderful. Lisa?
Geoff, yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Kagan. I started out my career as a management consultant at Deloitte, specializing at the intersection of emerging and disruptive technology, changing consumer behaviors and preferences, and the new business models that emerged as a result of that. We're involved in building a number of businesses, one of them being Time Bank, which is a digital emerging markets bank, the fastest growing in the world at the moment. So I didn't start out, I wasn't born scrappy, should I say. I then married a scrappy and somehow managed to start a greenfields metal recycling operation in New Zealand, which we grew really quickly. And my role there was building out our digital infrastructure to deliver better consumer experiences, improve our profit margins, and improve our productivity in our end-to-end operation, as well as the brand and marketing as well. When we exited that business, as an outsider looking in, I'd noticed that there was a lack of really good solutions for the industry from a technological perspective. And I felt, this is an industry, people are waking up at the crack of dawn, they're working so hard, they're doing such good for the world, and they're just, not being well serviced by the technology industry. So we thought we might do something about that between Stu and I, my partner in life and work. And now we're building Buddy. Buddy is a B2B recycled metals marketplace and trade operating system for suppliers currently in North America who are, either selling domestically or globally, and for buyers globally and in North America as well, to help them, on the buy side, help the metal find you, and on the supply side, more productivity and at the end of the day, better bottom line. So, yeah, Blake.
Great. Hey, I'm Blake Gordon, and I lead customer experience, marketing, and digital transformation for Georgia-Pacific Recycling. So basically, my job is to make it slightly less of a pain to deal with us than it usually is. So if you're not familiar with Georgia-Pacific Recycling, we are one of the largest pure traders of recycled content in the world. We source all of the fiber that goes into our mills. So, your Brawny towels and Dixie and any box you've ever ordered probably. If there's recycled content in it, we've gone out and sourced that, right? So, in trying to make us, a little bit easier to deal with, a little bit easier to find, all that kind of things, we have two things. My shameless plug is, this is right in front of you actually. We have our Hubit, which is our online buying platform. So what that does is it provides upfront pricing for up to 55 different materials across all three grade commodities. You can go in there, you can transact, you can find how much your material is worth, you can talk to a person. It's kind of making it easier to find us in a sense. And then once you found us, then GPR 365 is the other thing in front of you, and that's our self-service portal. So, if you're looking for ETAs, if you're trying to figure out where my truck is, if you're, you need some accounting documents so you don't have to call and find the right person in email, there's just in time information right there. You can help yourself and, move on your day. So it's about saving time is kind of my goal, right? My background's mostly in product development and new business model innovation. Found myself in the industry about 5 years ago. And, I think what we're talking about today is very germane to everything that needs to happen so people can grow and scale their business. So I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. The title of this includes next gen technologies, and I have to ask each one of you, what does that mean to you? How do you define next gen technologies?
I'll get us started here. For me, I think next gen is really looking at processes that are eligible to be broken. I'll give an example, and I mentioned asset maintenance, and for fixed asset maintenance specifically, you think of it as on a schedule, or fix it when it breaks. One thing that we're really excited about at AMCS is an offering that we have that actually can start to predict when things might go wrong, right? Obviously, you invest into your asset maintenance schedule. You would invest into your reactive repair, but that causes downtime, right? And sizing your asset maintenance schedule is a cost consideration. And so wouldn't it be great if you could actually understand the risk level that you have with your fixed assets through a technology that actually looks at the lubricants and analyzes metal shavings if the equipment's not performing as expected, and hey, there's something major that you should do now that's going to save you downtime and potentially an baked asset maintenance schedule in the future. And so working on those types of things that don't disrupt the things you should be doing today, but actually help you avoid big disruptions into your operation. Those are the types of things that we think are fantastic candidates for next-gen innovation.
Yeah, I think, for me, next gen are technologies that are really transformative, that are going to change the ways we work, the business models that we put out there. If you look at, to history, what sort of next gen technologies have there been, things like the internet that was hugely disruptive and it changed distribution forever. Look at things like cloud computing and mobile technology that changed, access at scale. And of course, at the moment, you're looking at things like, AI and even agentic AI, and that is causing a huge transformative shift. And so I think it's these technologies that are relatively new, but that are going to cause a lot of disruption, a lot of change, and that are sometimes scary. And we look at them and say, wow, that's super cool. But what do we do with it? And where do we start and how? So if you're asking those questions about a technology, it's probably next gen tech.
Yeah, when I think about next gen tech, I think it's really anything that can simplify something that's unnecessarily complex. And it's also subjective and, to the industry, and situational, right? So like you said, agentic AI is the next gen that you hear about in all the technology and marketing conferences, and it's how we get agents talking to each other and to where you never have to talk to somebody, right? But I don't think that's the next gen for the recycling industry. I mean, we say the same thing, right? Relationships mean everything. They mean so much in this industry, and they mean more than they do in other industries. So where agentic can make sense there, it might not here. But simplifying other things, right? Do you have to be on the phone all the time? Do you have to spend 6 hours a day trying to get a price and trying to get an idea if that's a fair price? Those kind of things. Can we simplify those? Can we get documentation quicker? Can we streamline how we calculate certain things? That's the kind of stuff that I feel like is next gen technology for this industry, right? We have to catch up to other industries in some ways, but there's a reason why we are the way we are. And it's because of the nuances of this industry that other industries could never understand, right? And that you try to apply certain technologies to this industry and you're going to fall flat on your face because of those nuances that they don't understand. So, it doesn't have to be big and scary, but it can take something and simplify it and save so much time. It's about time savings.
To build off of that, what would you say are some of the biggest misconceptions about implementing AI, robotics, even software solutions in our industry, in recycling operations?
I think for me, if you don't mind, I'll jump in here. AI, right? The term AI, and I'm going to borrow this from where I saw it somewhere else. Think about AI not as artificial intelligence, but as augmented intelligence, right? It shouldn't be making a decision for you, but it should be helping you make decisions, right? And helping you make decisions faster. If we think about like a one-man, one-woman shop versus someone who has a partner, how much quicker can you make decisions if you have somebody to bounce an idea off and say, am I crazy? Or, right? These kind of things. It's kind of like going to therapy. But can it make you help you make those small decisions and simplify the small decisions that ladder up to the big decisions? Because it's never like you wake up one day and you changed your entire business. That's not how it works, right? but there's this knowledge base that happens over little learnings and little decisions along the way. And that's where you can augment your intelligence and do those things faster and make decisions faster. Small calculations. Those are the kind of things that AI, however you consider it, should be helping you out with, so that you have the right information. You have this base of information, almost like an intern did all of your work for you, and then brought it to you to make a decision on, right? That's kind of how I think about AI.
I mean, I think in terms of big misconceptions is a lot of people, when we talk to them about Buddy, for example, they say, oh, no, our system does that already. I can patently state that it doesn't. Misunderstanding in terms of the technology you have, who in your team is using it, what they're using it for, and the benefits that you can derive from it. So I think just even understanding your own technology stack, and what it is and isn't doing. And I guess, misconceptions around, oh, no, this isn't for us. We don't need that. But, the question is, do you need to be more productive? Do you want insights that you cannot possibly get from a bunch of humans unaugmented, by intelligence? And so, whatever industry you're in, data is necessary. It's kind of like if you look at an auto shredder, right? If you don't have any ferrous material to feed into that thing, nothing good is coming out the other side. And the same is with technologies like AI. Data is the new oil, and that is what we need to feed in order to get good insights from it. And so if you don't have good systems of record, if your systems of record aren't talking to one another, you're not in position to take advantage of a lot of these technologies. And people think, well, yeah, maybe it is for us, but not now. It's kind of like compound interest. If you are a company who's capturing all that data now, you can never catch up with the companies who've been capturing it for a while. And that's because, AI and all of these new technologies are about learning from your data, and that takes time. And so if you're only going to start implementing this type of, technology in 5 or 10 years time, just know that you can never catch up.
And I think there's a real value to the concept of modeling, right? And I think there's a lot of the human instinct is trial and error, right? And that has real impact on your business, on the velocity that you can grow, on your employees, your suppliers. But actually using AI or these types of models to ask scenario questions, understand based on the information that you've provided it, what kind of output can you get a lot of insights into your business, and you actually find the questions that you should be asking, right? And so you might not always be looking for the answer, but what is the quality of your data? What is the quality of your assumptions about your business? How do those hold up when you actually run them through a model and get a result? Is that result something satisfactory, expected, or something completely unexpected? And you have to kind of go back to the drawing board and say, am I giving it the right parameters, the right source data, or do I have a deeper problem? And that's a lot of the areas that you need to kind of look at from an infrastructure perspective. Are you ready to implement this type of automation? But it doesn't mean you shouldn't engage in it, right? And start asking those questions and getting the learnings about your own understanding of your business today.
One more thing, I think what's been interesting about playing around with GPTs and AIs and all that is how quickly it teaches you about your own communication style, right? Are you asking the right question, and are you framing it up the right way? Because you'll quickly learn that you did not, right? How many times have we relied on somebody else, whether it be a vendor or a fellow employee or something like that, and then you're upset with the output they gave you, but did you prompt that the right way? I mean, I think it's funny, the feedback loop that you get, and you're like, wow, this is a lot of this is on me,
Which, as a fun little tool, the next time that you use ChatGPT or whatever AI tool, and you're looking for an outcome, ask it, after you tell it for the outcome that you're looking for, ask it what questions you need it to ask you for it to get the best possible outcome. And it's going to ask you a series of questions so that you can provide it with the better data that it needs. So think about that for your business and your operations. Like Lisa was talking about earlier, the better data that you're putting into these types of systems, the better outcomes you're going to get. Geoff, when you're talking about software platforms and our industry in general, there's a pretty wide range of some who might still be using some paper, to some that are already implementing AI in their operations throughout. And what have you seen, or what kind of advice would you give when you're talking about, how software platforms can make or break operational efficiencies? What are those critical steps that facilities should take before they're implementing these types of AI or automation systems?
We're a strong believer in having a firm North Star. Digitization, adoption of technology that impacts the way that you do your business can sometimes be difficult. You're going to have to overcome organizational change. You might have to change some of the ways that you interact with your vendors or your suppliers. You may have to change the way that you have certain processes set up, right? Hold front-end employees more accountable because they're going to be using a digital system rather than paper to benefit your back office processes who are going to have to do less data cleanup. And so preparing for that change means that you need to have a clear value that you're pursuing, right? And so I think, what we've seen is troubling or difficult implementations are often chasing the way things are done today and trying to force new technology to accommodate what you're used to doing. The organizations that are very good at driving that change not only have a clear value statement of what are we looking to achieve, but they've also practiced some of the change that's going to come in, whether that's standardizing your inventory valuation across multiple yards and recognizing that not everybody looks at that the same way across the company. And if you're moving to a platform that's going to standardize that, you have to all have the same view, right? So what does it look like to actually standardize and land on that common process and practice it through? See what comes out, see who has an unintended consequence or, financial ramifications that you didn't expect, and it helps you practice for that. But really having that North Star of what are we looking to achieve, having everybody subscribe to that, prepare you to get over some of those challenges that you'll inevitably find.
Lisa, Buddy's gained a lot of attention for disrupting the traditional process when it comes to trading more of maybe the scrap and also some of the behind the scenes processes. Can you walk us through a specific case where your tech was integrated into the recycling workflow and what hurdles it had to overcome?
Sure. So, Buddy is an end-to-end trading platform. So what I mean by that is it connects your trading team with your back office administration and finance, with your yard operations team. And so there's a lot of change that has to happen there. There's a lot of adoption across the org that has to happen, for this to be able to have your data run smoothly from one end, from the trade all the way through to getting the metal out the door. And, we had a situation where we had, somebody who was of the next generation running the company, and they were adamant, we don't really need this software because, we're already getting the best price in the market. And we said, well, why don't you try? There's no harm in doing something a little different. And they said, yeah, no, it seems interesting. Let's try that. And, on Buddy, you're able to offer your material out to your existing buyers and the buyers in the Buddy marketplace. And 100% of the trades are done. That are done on Buddy are done because they've managed to get a better price in the system. And so, when people see, I always say recurring impact creates recurring value, right? When they see that impact, when they list their material and they're getting a great price, or they're getting better payment terms they were getting, or whatever's important to them, actually, that creates some momentum in an organization. People get excited about it. And really, I think the most success we've had in terms of adoption are people seeing that impact and then seeing that impact early. And that really filters through to the team. You then got your trading team encouraging the admin team, saying, come on, guys, this is really good. And, I actually don't want to email you every time I do a trade. I just want the system to notify you, because what am I doing here? We can automate this, and then the admin team starts adopting, and they kind of then say to the yard, guys, I don't want you coming in here with your SD card for me to put the loading photos on here. Just take it in the app, right? It's just going to go straight into the system. Let's just do that. And so, yeah, I think we really focus there on getting that impact really early on, that like time to first value. And then people, they believe in it because they've seen the value.
This question is going to go out to all of the panelists. When we're taking a look at the technology deep dives, AI, robotics, advanced sorting, these are all buzzwords that are constantly being thrown around out there. But which of these technologies do you think truly has the greatest scalability across small, medium, and large recycling companies in our industry?
I'll get into this. So I think one of the funny things about AI is we talk about it as this mythical thing that you have to interact with. We're finding a lot of innovation is actually happening a bit under the hood, right? So, typically the vendors that you might be dealing with, the software providers or the solution providers, we're already using AI in our back office or our development processes, right? So it's already benefiting you in ways that aren't visible to you. You don't have to interact with it. So I think AI is truly, really scaling out. And then the ability for AI to start interacting with end users and presenting those decision points. And I agree with you 100%, right? You don't want AI to make decisions for you, but rather present you with the opportunity to make a decision with the information that you might need to do so. So really rethinking what we might have otherwise looked to reports or dashboards to do, to actually be queuing up decision points and then automated workflows back into your business. So that combination, I think, is already here and well adopted, and it's growing quickly. The friction point is generally going to be around, how do I have to interact with AI? How would it impact my customer relationships? But it's already moving in ways that are benefiting the industry.
I'm going to say something a bit controversial, I think. Our industry, I really do feel, got left behind by technology. And like I said earlier, it hasn't been very well serviced. And I think when I speak to a lot of people in the industry, about their inventory system, I would normally refer to it as an ERP outside of this industry. That's commonly used terminology. And they say, oh, the software system, right? And that's very telling in and of itself, the software system, because it's the only software system in most of these organizations. And so, there've been a lot of waves of change, and we have not rode those waves, right? And so I think that cloud technology at the moment in this industry, we're currently riding that wave. If you've only got a single system and it's not integrating with any other systems, you're not going to get, you're not set up. You've got to crawl before you walk, before you run. And to really take advantage of AI, you want to have all these systems talking to one another through APIs, for example. I mean, even if you've got a legacy system, it's not ruling out being able to, there's ways of doing it. We did it in our business, set up a data center, funnel that into another system. There's ways to access that, but just having the mindset of this universal view of your own data, I think, is so important and so powerful. And that's how, with AI, it's able to see things that are, invisible to just the human eye. You don't have the capacity, the bandwidth to crunch all that data and identify all the patterns to glean those insights. And so, I think looking at your technology stack and saying, okay, it's not just this software anymore. What is our whole technology stack? How are we integrating those systems, or at least getting a universal data set? I think that's something that really needs to happen before we can really run with AI.
It's so funny when you said that. When I heard you say the software system, I didn't hear the software system. I heard, you mean the software system? It's such disdain most times, right? And I think that has to do with, it's because the onus is on you, right? The onus is on you to embrace it. And by you, I mean everybody in the organization a bit. And I think that's where the question of which one can be more impactful is a bit of a loaded question, because there's switching costs to both, right? There's costs to both. The robotics is going to have a huge upfront, investment, right? But you're going to have a company that maintains it, and it's going to take care of itself, or not take care of itself, but it's going to be taken care of. It's going to work. It's going to do the thing, right? But it's just like Lisa's already said, with the AI, you have a smaller investment in terms of getting started, and you can right size it to whatever you want it to be. But then the onus is on you, right? Good in, good out. You have to feed the machine. You have to feed the beast. You have to make changes. You have to change the way you talk. You have to, the way you interact, I should say. The prompts you give, the questions you give. It's almost like you have to be diligent with this kind of stuff, right? To truly embrace it and to evolve and lean into it, you have to lean into it. So, that's kind of where my mind goes in terms of which one's easier or which one's going to have more impact. It's going to be how you want to invest in that moving forward, right?
I went to AIS Tech last week. It's the steelmaking conference, the Association of Iron and Steel Technology. And we make steel. I'm talking to obviously everyone who knows this, mainly from scrap recycled materials. And yet for an industry in the United States that makes their steel from mainly recycled materials, they have companies there for the melt shop, for the rolling mill, for their full downstream, right? That use AI. And they have been for years to maximize it. And yet, what's their biggest cost at a steel mill? By far, what's their biggest cost? Raw materials. And yet, why has these technologies not been implemented in our world? And also, why are we not showing up to that conference, by the way?
Pick me.
Just, Stu, Lisa, just suggestion. It's something to think about because there's a real opportunity from a profit margin standpoint, from operational efficiency standpoint, to really take a look at your businesses and see that there are opportunities here to implement something that has been happening in other areas of our industry. There's a company called Paperless Parts that has been around for over a decade. That is software that uses AI to essentially help job shops write quotes, RFQs, because in job shops, it's a real hassle to do quotes for small jobs, right? It takes time. It's not very efficient. And yet that's been around for over a decade. And it's just now making its way into our world. There are all of these opportunities that exist when you go down the line that we could be looking at in our world and be implementing them, but we just haven't opened up and expanded our eyes a little bit to see how can we take something from a little bit maybe outside our world and apply it here.
Well, I think, if you don't mind jumping in on that, because I'm going to yes and or agree with you, right? But it doesn't have to be binary. It doesn't have to be, this is going to take away my ability to pick up the phone and call, right? It's not. It's not an either or. It's a yes and. And that I think again is where I go to that augmented experience, that augmented reality, that augmented intelligence of, you can pick the phone all you want, right? But talk about things you want to talk about rather than the tiny, minuscule things and have that be automated, that, right? It doesn't have to be, it takes something away because you embrace something else. It's leveling yourself up a little bit. And I think sometimes in the industry, I hear that a lot, especially, with like our self-service portal. So, I hear that exact statement. So it's going to take away the ability for me to pick up the phone. No, it's not going to take that away. But do you really want to spend hours trying to find one of your accounting documents? That doesn't seem like why you wanted to talk to us. You wanted to talk to us about what's going on in the market, right? And how it's going to improve your business and help your bottom line. Finding an accounting document is not going to do that, right? Unless it's for tax purposes. But, and the same thing with Hubit, right? I mean, that's why we've leaned into this relationship aspect. It's still a relationship. You're still dealing with Georgia Pacific Recycling and there's still somebody there to talk to, but there's so much information we can give you up front that you were going to call us about and you don't have to wait anymore. And that's kind of what I felt in this industry a bit, is this binary nature, right? The thought process.
I mean, just to add to that, a lot of people, I think, have a deeply held belief that technology and relationships are mutually exclusive, right? And my question to those people is always, do you use LinkedIn, right? Because that just disproves that technology can really enable and enhance relationships and help build new connections and deepen relationships. And so, I think sometimes we have to look at these deeply held beliefs and really just, question, are these still valid? Is this still true? Are these things opposing forces? And they're not, But to what you mentioned earlier, Jen, you said, why don't we have this proliferation of tech in this industry what's going on. Like, are we allergic to technology in this industry? No, right? Are we scared of it? Sure, but most people are. Most people are scared of change. Nobody really likes change and just embraces it at any organization. And I think, what's happened over the years is there have been two types of people who've come into this industry to build software, right? The first type is pure technologists. They've said, hey, look at this opportunity. This industry has not digitized. What an opportunity. I will build for them, right? The problem is those people don't have the lived experience. They haven't, worked in the yards. They haven't traded the material. They haven't felt the pain and the suffering of certain aspects and, lost money and made money and all those things doing the things that we do in this industry. And so those technologists are missing that context, right? Then you've got people who are from the industry who have no experience or little experience building technology, right? So they have all the context, but aren't necessarily skilled in building and bringing to market products. And so I think it's quite a unique industry where we've had a lot of those two things. And of course, a shameless plug, that's what we're really excited about with Buddy, is we've got that technology and product building experience as well as the deep domain expertise. And it would be great if I met a gentleman this morning. I think his name was June. Sorry, I don't know if you're here, June, and if I've got your name wrong, sorry. But he also comes from the technology world. And he's partnered up with somebody who has deep domain experience in metal recycling, not necessarily creating a product like, Georgia Pacific or AMCS or Buddy, but he's using it internally, that skill set to build internally for themselves. And I think, thinking about who can we partner with, whether it's bringing them into the company, whether it's a service provider, that is how we're going to build tech that actually serves this industry.
But I think you bring up the partnership, right, between say a vendor, a technology vendor, and a scrap recycler, and helping to focus the insights and direct at the problems to solve. I'm not sure that we have an adoption problem. I think it's a bit of a trust issue. And as we deal with a wide set of solutions, right, as we track from the scale all the way through to the payments and the sale of the material, and touch multiple parts of an organization. We've actually found there's a lot of data silos inside the organization, and as we look to break those down and automate the sharing of that, right, and it's simply through moving through the process and sharing what happened in one part of your business to the next part of the business, we actually find that there's resistance to sharing that information, right? And there's degrees of sharing that people are comfortable with based on roles, and we start getting requests for approval tiers and different barriers to sharing. And so there's a lot of kind of those questions that start emerging of how much trust do you have in the things that you do today to digitize them even in a vacuum and have it ready to consume in another part of your business or outside your business to a vendor or a supplier. And so understanding kind of the core requirements of your business helps make you ready to engage with technology and understand how you're going to actually get that over the hump and what requirements you might have of it, right? Because you might want to take something off the shelf, but find that off the shelf exposes too much of your interdepartmental, even trade secrets, right, within your own organization. So doing those kind of deep dives and understanding the interactions inside your business is a great place to start interacting with a technology vendor.
You bring up a really interesting point that in any other context, it's something that we're all very familiar with in our industry, where we're all very private when it comes to our businesses. Up until probably 5 years ago, LinkedIn was not a thing that we did in our business. We weren't really on social media. I'm still highly encouraging all of y'all to get out there a little bit more for our industry, but the trust factor, the privacy factor of not wanting to share our data or have others be aware of the business that we're doing, even if it's with a company that we've contracted with data-wise. Is that something that you think is just unique for our industry because of the history of our industry? Or do you think that's an issue that happens in other heavy industries?
I think it's typical of any industry that is almost been shaped by the technology that's available to it, right? And so, in a number of senses, technology is moving faster than the ability to adopt it. And so a lot of the processes that you'd find that people would recognize as industry standard were simply born out of the best available technology at the time. And now that we've really opened up and moved away from on-premise technology that's heavily role-based and, can kind of build those unnatural silos to cloud-based SaaS technology that is all about data sharing and automated workflows, it's almost a jarring experience to have to go break the things that you thought your business required that were built out of the software that you had or the technical solutions that you had, and move into and think of your business a little bit more holistically without those constraints. What should we be doing and how do we adopt new technology? So we're almost it's almost like a victim of the past that we need to collaborate together to get out of. And it requires both sides, right? So there's no perfect technology that can come in and work without interaction from the scrap metal industry. We need that collaboration. We need that feedback to help prioritize, where do we accelerate adoption?
I mean, I don't think it's a data privacy thing as much as it is not wanting to share data, right? The question is, what data are you sharing and with whom? And is there a case for it?
And why?
Yeah, and why? Is there a case for it, And so I think a big part of change management when it comes to implementing technologies is cultivating a first team mindset. So it's not about the shipping team or the trading team or the finance team, right? It's the first team, which is, the leadership of the business. What is the business doing, right? And so if you stop thinking about just your department or just your division and what you want to keep secret or what the information you want to hold or own, and you think about it from an organizational level, I think that really does change the approach and your thinking. And just to encourage that kind of thinking, like imagine if in this department they had access to this spreadsheet, right? I'm saying spreadsheet because that is what it is in the vast majority of companies, right? But they don't want to do that. Why don't they want to do it? They don't want someone to mess up their spreadsheet because it's not rigid enough. Someone can, they might not know how to set it that way, etc. And so that's where systems with embedded process and doing away with those analog systems, a lot of the time that data, that information they don't want to share, actually the reasons were, like you say, stuck in the legacy systems that have shaped the mindsets, right? And so I think just asking why and digging and probing, a lot of the time there aren't actually data privacy issues. Most good systems out there have good privacy and data controls and policies around them, and so it's not really about that. It's about other things.
And I don't want this whole panel to be a shame on our industry, because, it's having come from other industries in the past, we're all guilty of it, right? It's human nature to try and want the safe path of how do I try this thing, but keep it super safe with a really clear parachute, right? If anything goes awry. But that's not how you innovate. That's not how you try something new. If you're going to wait until it's safe, you're way too late, right? With a lot of these things, you're behind. So, I think two things that we need to realize is, and this is also human nature, it's like we're not as big of a star of our own show as we think we are. There's not that many people, with a magnifying glass on top of us as we think. And then also, we're not as clever as we think we are. We're not as slick, So it's like some of the information you're afraid to get out there is already out there probably, right? Some of that data, right? So it's about taking a risk. I mean, this was a heated battle that we had internally about Hubit, about we're putting upfront pricing out there and anybody can go see it. Yes. But they probably already have that. And, they probably know what our price is. We have these relationships and this is a pretty intimate, industry. So, but, if we're not going to try that, then we're not going to reach other audiences and we're not going to get people started and we're not going to demystify recycling for other players and new entrants and all this kind of stuff. So, I think I would encourage to just kind of take a little bit of a leap of faith, maybe like a hop of faith even. And try something new. That's my advice.
Our panel ends at 45 after, and I do have several more questions for the panelists, but I also want to be respectful to see if there are any questions out in the audience now, because we could probably keep going. So I do want to take a moment and see if there's any questions that we could start kicking off for the audience. And we've got mics out there. I can bring my mic out there if you don't want to come up to the mic now, but we can take a few minutes and answer a few of yours. We won't be too negative. We'll be very positive. Promise. Go for it.
I guess my question is, and I tried it in the podcast, it's quite easy to say all this when you're on stage, but when you're actually in the yard and now you're the guy who needs to start implementing that, change is scary. You mentioned that. What are like the 3 things, I don't care what the number is, 5 things, 200 things that everybody here right now could leave and do right away as they get back to just start the process, or even if they're kind of in it already, but to move to the next stage?
I mean, I think the number one thing is to go back to your teams and find out where is the pain, right? What are the things that are holding you back? Where are the bottlenecks? Where are the disconnects? And understand where the pain is, right? Instead of being solution-led, be problem-led and understand, because each organization is going to have their unique problems and their unique challenges. And I think if you understand that, that's a great starting point, because then you can say, okay, these are the problems we're looking to solve. And then you can go looking for solutions. And really, when you go looking for solutions, you mentioned this a little bit earlier, the onus is on you to ask the right questions, right? Because if you're just being led by the technology provider and not asking the right questions, the chances are that it may not be a good fit for you. It might be a perfectly good product, but not something that's going to solve your problem. So I think that's the number one thing that anybody could leave this room and go home and do tomorrow. So, yeah. And
I think to ladder on to that, I think the right question to ask is why, right? There's a practice called the 5 whys. And there's credit to somebody else who's much smarter than me that came up with this. Yes. And it gets to root cause analysis, right? If you ask, the theory is like, if you ask why 5 times, you usually get to the reason of why something is there. And there's so much in our business that we do and we don't know why we do it, right? We have these practices that we do today. It was probably a Band-Aid 30 years ago. And then it just became SOP, right? We were like, oh, well, we'll come up with a better process later. And we never came up with a better process because we just put out more fires, right? That's what we all do in this industry. We put out fires every day, all day. And we don't think about why that fire started in the first place or what the kindling was. But if you talk about what the pain points are of, what is eating up all of your time to where you can't get to that new, customer or that new buyer, or, you can't get into a new grade, you can't get source, this kind of stuff, right? Why don't you have time for that? Start asking yourself why. Sit down, spend an hour as a team and just ask the question, why 5 times? Well, I don't have time. Why don't you have time? Because I have to do this, this, and this. Well, why is that so time consuming? Because I have to make phone calls and I can't get a hold of the person. Well, why can't you get a hold? Right. I'm not going to bore you guys with that, but I think that's a good way to break something down to where it's not so scary and you kind of understand why it is the way it is. And then you can address the actual pain, right? Instead of just band-aiding and on top of a topical solution, you're actually, treating the illness at the bottom, the base.
I think as you're looking at the why, and I agree completely with what you're saying, I think it's really important to evaluate your opportunity, right? So if you were to address this pain point, what would it mean to your organization? And there's a lot of ways that you can look at valuation, right? You can look at it through, business growth. Hey, we want to get into new markets or, break into, new industries that we're not serving today. We might want to mitigate risk, right? So we have a large risk that we're carrying. We don't want that to come to fruition, so we need to take steps to mitigate the risk. It could be cost reduction. So cost reduction can be a large way, but at least understand what it is that the value of what you're pursuing, right, to fix that problem, and that'll help size your efforts, right? And so depending on the available technology, what the fit might be to address that, does the cost and effort for what you're looking to put in stack up to the value of what you're trying to achieve? And if those are in balance, then you're good. You've already got a good governance system. You can be confident that you're going to overcome challenges and you're going to deliver value to your organization. If those are out of whack, you might be looking at too big of an effort to address a smaller problem. Maybe you look at a more creative way to address that pain, but definitely valuation of the opportunity to fix that problem is a really important step.
Which that's something that we do on the physical operation side all day, every day. When you take a look at a new piece of equipment, are you looking at the runtime, the ROI of it, what the maintenance cost of it is, how much is it going to cost, right? And yet, do we sit down and we ever take a look at the internal operations, what the cost is going to be? Is there a software system where our entire team can actually be more efficient? Is our overhead going to reduce, or can we actually get more output with the same overhead, and now our profit margins have increased? We do it in the yards, outside, or in the warehouse, and yet it's not something that we traditionally think about from the software side.
Because I think it's much harder to quantify opportunity costs than it is hard costs, right? I mean, that's probably a trite statement, but it's the truth, right? I mean, how you spent all this time on something that you just assumed, well, that's just the way it is. Is it? Does it have to be? And what is that worth? What could that time have been worth where you spent on this mundane task that you could have spent calling a customer, right? And finding a new one, that kind of growth.
One area that we like to work with our clients on is evaluating your report catalog, right? So reporting gets a lot of airtime, right? We all love reports, and we send reports, and we need reports. And, so looking at however many reports you might be using in your organization, and what is the actual use of it? One of the best ways that you can just take an easy step into digitization is carve down the amount of data you have flying around and the effort associated with gathering that data, and help target it at what people will actually use, what people are actually using to make decisions. That's one of the things that you would have to do inevitably if you were implementing technology anyway, is to retire the old reporting structure and look at the data presentation to your organization differently. But look at the report catalog, right? And just run through, do people use this? Yes, no. See how much come off the top right there and how much time saving you can get. And that's a great way to just get into it and moving, understanding how you could use digital tools better.
Speaking on that, I use AI as a way to determine whether or not I go to that conference. So a lot of the conferences do not publish the attendees list, correct? But some like to share which companies go, correct? So I have a list of companies and people that I tend to target. And so what I can do with AI is I can use essentially scrubbing of the conference website to then cross-reference with the Excel spreadsheet that I keep. And it'll tell me percentage-wise whether or not the cost benefit works or not. And this is something that you can do from a commercial standpoint. Albert.
Question is primarily to Geoff or whoever else wants to attempt it. Donald Rumsfeld used to say, you know what you don't know, but you don't know what you don't know. And our business is buying and selling scrap. We don't know what's out there. If you're coming into a new client, what are you going to come to them with and say, this is a solution that other people have used that can save X amount of dollars. This will improve your business. It will streamline and simplify things, because there's a lot of, we're not in the technology business, the software business. We're in the business of buying and selling scrap. So what is it that you have? I know the buddy system has been touting the fact that, we're going to make it easier for you to trade and open up the marketplace and bring you more contacts. But as far as software and the use of artificial intelligence, what do you have that's going to make us better?
Okay, well, appreciate that question. I think, one of the things that is really important is how connected you are across the different parts of your organization, right? And I think probably one of the biggest things that, at least from AMCS perspective, that we do is give visibility and connectivity across those different practices. So we know that your freight and logistics is a huge cost center, right? And one of the biggest areas that you can impact your margins, the manner in which you have inventory valuations, and how do you prepare to have a clean inventory at the end of every month, right? And practice the steps that you would take to know what you have in the yard, and the value of that is a really important one. We tend to size our interactions and advisements of value to the size of the organization that we're talking about, right? Are we talking about multiple yards, multiple states, multiple countries? What are the payment systems that you have in place? How do you digitally interact with your vendors and your suppliers? How do you do transfers and things like that? I mean, we're a student of our client's business to make sure that we're bringing forth the appropriately sized solution to them. At the core, what we're primarily pursuing is to bring on-premise technologies into the cloud to address cybersecurity concerns, make data more accessible, and to spark innovation where it might be hindered today. Where our clients, typically need to invest on their side is to have, somebody who can lead a technical, implementation and understand technology, somebody who's done ERP implementations in the past, and can help guide through, kind of the resources that you'd need to invest in, how to organize your team, right? Obviously, you're going to have experts who are doing a day job and now also implementing a technology. How do you balance that? So we go through a consultative process to really evaluate what is the right size of solution that we should be bringing forth, and how can we help you and your organization prepare to take on that process of adoption.
And I'll let her into that if that's okay. Our 365 Connect platform, we have a freight calendar on that has AI built in. So we handle the freight, in most cases, high majority of them, right? And through that, it optimizes for both of us, because we all know freight can have a huge matter of fact and play within these deals and erode that value quickly, right? So we're trying to optimize that. And so you can see it in real time. Hey, if I move it on Tuesday instead of Wednesday, there's this much more margin in it for me, right? This much more value. And then with Hubit, in terms of helping you with your new customer, if you're going to source it and you're looking for an outlet, right? I mean, you can get real-time pricing 24/7 within Hubit of what we pay right here, right now. We can handle it. We can handle logistics. We're also backed by a Fortune 500 company. You're going to get paid, right? But what's been interesting for us with Hubit also has been outside of the recycling market, right? Those that are not in the know, in this kind of demystifying recycling. It's not a myth, or we wouldn't all be here, right? There is a real business here, and there's this marketplace that so many other industries are not privy to. And they just go with, what's right in front of them, what seems obvious, and that gets somebody to take it away, not knowing that there's value in this material. And God, hopefully they're not landfilling it, right? But that's where Hubit has helped, activate a lot of people, a lot of different industries, and quite a wide array of a vast array of different industries, to realize, oh, there's a lot of value in this. This is how much this is worth. I had no idea, right? So,
Dave.
So as the guy that sells that software, I've been on hundreds of installs and set up our software across, many different environments. And I think the thing that people need to realize is the complexity of software versus the complexity of machinery. And that people can go up to a baler, they can go up to a truck, and they can physically put their hands on it, and they can see a big chunk of steel, and they can say, oh, that has value. But then on the other side of it, you get Google Docs, and you get all this free stuff that's out there, that people then get this perception that things are simple and things have, relatively no value to them. And so there's this disconnect between what software represents to a business versus what physical equipment represents to the business. And from our experience, I'll tell you, the baler goes down, big deal. It's down for a couple of days. We can survive the business. Not a big deal. The software goes down. 1 hour of a business without their receiving working, without their shipping working, without their ability to pay their customers, and everybody's running around with their hair on fire. And there's that perception lacking of what the importance of the software is to the business that seems to be lost to people in the recycling industry. They can see the physical, but they can't see the virtual that's out there and the effects that it has on it. So when you go to get software and implement it within your organizations and try and upgrade and do things, recognize that it's really more important than most anything else you have. The baler affects the operation of a couple of people. The software affects the operation of everybody. And so people are willing to put money into the physical stuff, but they don't necessarily put the money into the virtual stuff. And so the industry needs to find that balance of what really has value to them in order to really take it to the next level.
And I think there's something important that you're touching on too, right? And that's this key of iteration. So yeah, Google Docs works great. And how many times has Google Docs been iterated? You probably know this answer because you always said these answers. But how long has Google Docs been around, and how much feedback have they gotten? And they changed, and they also built it off of something else that was kind of similar, right? So it's out there. Yeah, it works great, but it probably didn't work I know it didn't work near as good as it does now, right? So I think one of the things that's key, one of the things you can do today, to Stu's question, is know that you're not going to get it right out of the gate. You're almost guaranteed it's not going to be right out of the gate, right? Because you're taking something that's never been digital before and digitizing it. And you also have strict rules in digitization, right? So when we implemented our Connect portal, for example, all of a sudden all these exceptions came up, and it cost us more. It was more work that we had to do. But actually what it was doing is just picking up the rug and looking in the closet where we stuffed all these things before, and we were putting out fires and we were just doing workarounds. We didn't know that, right? Because one person down the line did it this one time, and then 5 more people did it another time. And so now what it's doing is it's shining a light on us, and it's opening up opportunity costs. But if it's not embraced well, that can be seen as the thing doesn't work. It's broken. It's actually causing us more time. Well, it's got to be a little bit of pain right now for change, right? What we talked about this whole time is change management, so that we can be better in the future.
I think, Dave, you raised something really important there, that we're in an industry, a physical industry, right? And we've got a permanence mindset. When we think about buying a piece of capital equipment, often that's a years-long process. What are you going to buy? Which one should you buy? You go and view it in action in other countries or other cities or whatever. You then order it. They've got a manufacturer. It's going to get shipped. And so making a decision, it's very permanent. What you get, the machine you get is pretty much, you can do modifications, the machine you're going to get, right? But when it comes to technology, if you use that permanence mindset, it's not a fair reflection, because what happens with cloud-based technology is it is iterative, right? So every different technology has the cycles in which they're releasing either new features or bug fixes or enhancements. For us, it's 2 weeks. I'm not sure what your cycles are, but so if you think about it, this thing that you bought every 2 weeks is getting better. Right. And so, you said you don't necessarily get it right out of the gate. There's not that permanence to it. It's not you bought it and it's good or it's bad. It's not binary. You bought this thing. And really, when it comes to technology, we're all co-creators, the people who create and provide the technology and the people who use it. You spoke about feedback loops, right? If something's not working the way you want, or it's not solving the problem that you were hoping it would solve, all you have to do is put up your hand and say, hey, this isn't doing the thing, or could it maybe do this? And that is literally the best thing for somebody building software, is when you get that feedback and someone asks the question, or even if it's a complaint, fantastic. It's feedback. We can do something with that, and so being able to take your mindset and say, right, this isn't the same. This isn't a baler we're buying, right? This is a software system, and it's amorphous.
There's a lot of merit to what you're saying. And in my experience, what I've seen is that no two businesses are the same. And people in this business are successful because they've come up with a niche way of doing things, or they have a slightly different way. Well, trying to have the software manage and do everything in many different ways tends to ratchet up the complexity of what the software does, which then tends to affect the user experience. And balancing all those things can be tough without it being a two-way street. We can produce technology, we can get change out there, we can update and upgrade things, but if the customers and the people using the software don't communicate back with us and don't have that interaction with the product, then it ends up, they get the horse blinders on, they do what they do, they end up making Excel spreadsheets to cover things, and they don't come back and say, hey, we got this spreadsheet that does this. Well, if you would have clicked right here and done that, you wouldn't need that spreadsheet anymore. So there's a lot of interactivity that you need to have with your vendors, and a recognition that they understand your business and what you're trying to achieve with that business in order for any software implementation to really be successful.
Go for it.
So, question I have, Lisa mentioned earlier that, data is the new oil. So in our business, one of the things that we have tried to do is include, process the data as much as possible. So for instance, we will look at all our vendors' datas, and we'll try and guess when they're going to have a certain material in their yard available to sell, send them the price at the right time, things like that. Or for instance, if we're running material through a toll program and we're melting it, yes, we'll guess what scrap, we should put in to try and optimize the chemistry and the cost. But we'll also run it through an optimization algorithm in the computer to try and guess that for us. One of the things that we have kept noticing, and this is where the question comes, is so far we haven't really, and we're a big believer in technology. This is not to question technology, but so far we haven't really been able to extract something that intuition has not already. We can guess things ahead of time pretty well. And that's something that a lot of people say when I've talked to them. So what my question is, in your experiences working with many different recycling companies, are you able to share an example of a time specifically where you were able to look at somebody's data and come out with something that humans could not just guess with their intuition ahead of time?
Can I go? So if you're melting, you're like the computer. You have years of data in your mind. That's your intuition. So a good example of that is there are analyzers that exist out there. I'll just shamelessly plug Gamatech. Okay. They scan essentially shred that go into new core mills. Those then basically tell the computers there, or their optimizers essentially, what the exact chemistry is of that scrap that goes into the melt shop. They now have the exact chemistry of that material that goes into the melt shop. That computer can now tell that melt shop manager exactly which materials that they need to now add in to optimize with the lowest cost for the highest chemistry to get the highest dollar amount. That's essentially the intuition that you're able to provide after years and years of being in this industry. Without that analyzer there, that data doesn't exist going into the melt shop. And that's essentially what we're talking about here, is the quality of the data that goes into these systems is key. That's essentially the difference between these two, because if you had a melt shop at a steel mill that didn't have an analyzer going in, I really hope you have somebody good there that has the years and years of knowledge that you do to be able to anticipate and have that intuition. Otherwise, you're going to need to have something that has that type of data that can put into that software to be able to pull out the information that we wouldn't have been able to pull out.
I think it's about,
go ahead.
It's about the quality of data, but it's also about the quantity of data. So, at the moment, with Buddy, we're a two-sided marketplace, and that puts you in quite a unique position where you're capturing data not only from the person who's supplying the material and the person who's buying the material, but the unique interactions between those two companies, right? And so you might be capturing certain things in your system, and that data is just the one side of the puzzle, right? And so whether it's, between two companies in a marketplace, or whether it's integrating your freight system with your operating system. I think you melt, right? So I'm not necessarily familiar with all the operating systems, but connecting those, then you get real insights that, would be really time consuming if you're looking at these things in isolation. And some of those things, you are able to, with humans, and a lot of time and maybe a lot of spreadsheets and modeling, etc., come to those insights. So I think it's about, what insights can you see that maybe are, not available to the human eye, but also how much more quickly, are you able to produce that sort of thing. So I think, having that volume of data and that diversity of data is what's going to drive those insights that were otherwise not available to you.
And I think that question culminates a lot of things we've talked about today too, right? Of the idea of good in, good out. So it can only be as good as the data that was fed. And you think you said it yourself, you've got some of the data, you don't have as much as you'd like, right? So, and then counting on technology to jump the shark in that situation, right? You're wanting it to do something better than what you can do today. But what about if it's doing it as good as you are today? And then it goes back to the other thing we talked about was the opportunity costs, right? That person that team, whomever it was that was coming up with these calculations and these recipes, the melt recipes, right, before, has a lot of legacy and tacit knowledge, right? Could you apply that somewhere else now? Instead, could you apply what's locked in their heads to another challenge, to another problem, to where instead of thinking about it leveling up knowledge, it freeing up knowledge almost, right? Freeing up bandwidth in that case. Because without something different and something new, AI is not creative, right? It's just taking data and manipulating it and doing different calculations and putting things in that others that might not have thought of, right? That's the only other thing it can really do. So I think this is a situation, right, where if we want to embrace technology, again, let's not count on it curing cancer day one, right? It's more like, can it simplify this one tedious task today? And then what's also going to happen is now you're going to feed that model with its own data. So who knows how that was captured before in the standard and the analog process, but now it's being captured, right? That whole calculation is now in a digestible form that can be iterated on, can be modified from there.
You raise a very important point there, and that's about institutionalization of knowledge, right? You have the people, you have the team who have the intuition and the gut feel from the years of experience. They might move on, right? What happens with them with that data and understanding and navigating it and drawing those insights if and when they leave? So, by having those systems and processes in place and institutionalizing the knowledge and embedding the process, that's got much more longevity in your business, and the ability, as I mentioned earlier, that compound interest, that learning of that data and learning from it. And again, the quantity of data in terms of the lifetime from a time span and just that diversity, all those things together are kind of the reasons why, if it does as good a job, that you might still want to implement that, freeing them up, all those kind of things as well.
I think a practical way to look at maybe not even getting into AI and kind of that automation, but is the frequency of validation for information that you're counting on to run your business. I'll use a practical example of inventory, right? And so where you're using assumptions to run your business, and then you're only validating those assumptions infrequently, say at the end of the month or at the end of the year, right? Everybody's scrambling to get the valuation straight so that you can ship material out of the yard at the end of the year. The value of validating that data more frequently is that you can start living not within averages, right, but find the improvements more incrementally and use that just day to day. But why don't you validate it more frequently? Well, it's burdensome. It's time consuming to go out and validate it. But that's where technology can help. One of the big things that we overhaul when we're doing implementations is actually that inventory practice and making access to a near real-time accurate inventory available, but that has impacts out at the yard. Now they're having to do things that they only did infrequently, a little bit more frequently. They're held accountable in a digital system where before you could kind of kick the can a little bit, right? So there's a trade-off of, we want access to data, we want the data to be accurate, but then you're going to hold the folks that are responsible for creating that data through their day-to-day activities a little bit more accountable, right? And so if you can overcome those types of changes, then you can get access to that accurate data, and that's a good foundation to launching into more automation, more AI, things like that. But that's a good way to find where an opportunity might lie, is that frequency of validation.
Dave?
So I can give you a real good world example of AI and how it can be used in this industry. So one of the things we encounter a lot of is theft. And one of the ways in which people will do theft is they will take a barrel or they will take a bale, they will set it aside, and the employees will reweigh it multiple times and assign that to different customers. Well, we've developed a system that goes through, looks at the pictures that are taken at the scale, because we take tens of thousands of pictures at a facility every month, and is able to look at and see from a top-down perspective how the material that was in one picture maybe shifted just a little bit, and a human has the capability of seeing that with their eyes. Well, now so does AI. So we can we can feed the AI with a bunch of images, and it can tell us that, hey, the material that's here that's being put onto this particular picture on the scale is slightly the same stuff based off of certain points that it sees on it. And then it's able to detect theft that's happening within organizations, because everybody has internal theft, or not everybody, but internal theft is a big problem within this industry. And it's a concrete way in which AI can help solve problems that you're encountering.
Which, to build on that, for those that ship into steel mills, there are steel mills in the U.S. that are using visuals and AI in their melt shops, not just for the chemistry, but also for the quality of the scrap currently. To wrap it up, I want to have one actionable recommendation for the next 30 days, something that y'all can walk away, implement within your businesses. If you had to give attendees just one practical action to move forward in the next 30 days, what would it be to implement smarter recycling technology in their business?
Starting with me. Why don't I start with Blake?
You're starting with me. Okay.
In reverse.
I mean, I think it's how I start everything, or how I like to approach any kind of solution, really. I mean, because a solution shouldn't exist if there's not a problem at the base, right? So Lisa already, I think, touched on it. You really have to define that problem, right? You have to define and quantify and measure as best you can right now with what you know, what that problem is. And you can take the one that keeps coming up or recurring or whatever, right? And you need to measure it, and then you need to make a bet against it. But you need to keep revisiting that bet as you go, and you take a small solution, as you test that solution, as you iterate on that solution, right? Is it hitting our bet? Is our bet right? So you need to remeasure the bet as you move as well, because you will learn. You will learn a lot as soon as you start this, and you will learn how wrong you were at the beginning. But you will know a lot more, and the next time you do it, it's going to be easier and it's going to be different. But it really, you got to write down the problem statement, and you've got to write down the bet. And you've got to stack hands on it. You've got to agree upon it. And then when you revisit it, you all need to stack hands on it again and say, is this the right bet? Change management is one of the biggest challenges when you implement technology internally. We're going through it right now of, the adoption, and then how you're measuring it is very important, and making sure that you are following that North Star that we touched on earlier, right? And that you're still heading in that way. Because, there may be a point where technology was not the right solution also, right? There could have been something simpler. There could have been something manual that you could have done. But you need to be comfortable with that. But what you're already doing is you're leveling yourself up by taking that step, right? By challenging what has been and what no longer needs to be that way.
I'd probably say start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. I think a lot of people don't even understand the current technology systems, some that you've been using for decades, what this thing can and can't do, how the team using it feels about it, and actually put your vendors to work. Call them in and say, look, this is where we're using the product. This is how we're using. This is where we're struggling. We want to get more value from this product. What else should we be doing? And can you hold our hand and help us do that, right? Because, especially with, for example, an inventory system, even if you are thinking of moving from one inventory system to another, that's not an overnight kind of thing, right? And so, whatever changes you're possibly planning in the future, you're living in the right now. And I guarantee you that every single person we've spoken to who is using an inventory system doesn't actually fully understand what it can and can't do, and sometimes are just completely underutilizing it in the first instance. So, go out there and put your vendors to work and help them let you get more value out of what you're already paying for.
Fully echo both of those. So do those things. I think I'll go back to the simple reports action. Take a look at the reports that live inside of your organization and just go through a binary. Is this being used? Yes, no. And even if they're reports that you provide to vendors or suppliers because they asked for it, or you've been doing it for years and somebody sends it every Friday, ask them, why are you using this? Why are you using it? What value do you have? And see how much utility you can get out of just paring down the amount of data that's being used in your organization in various areas, and be more intentional with your use of data. And I think that'll give you a lot of direction as to where can you provide value through engagement with software, technology, all the rest. But go take a look at all the reports that are being used in the organization and see if you keep them.
And that's an evergreen practice, right? Yeah. I mean, we run into that all the time. It's so many zombie reports, so many zombie projects that made a lot of sense at one point 5 years ago, right? Or whatever. But things change, and things change rapidly, especially with technology, especially with access to information. And so it's really important to scrub those, because you just opportunity cost, wasted time, all wasted effort, wasted cloud computing, all this kind of stuff can go into these reports that we thought were valuable at one point and just no longer are, right? And no one's reading them, and you're still sending them. And then they may not read the important report because you've sent them 30 useless reports, right? That's the other thing too, I think.
Get more precise on your KPIs and driving results rather than just reporting. Shouldn't be a historic look back at what happened, but rather start using it to drive and change the way that you're performing.
I want to thank all of you for being on the panel today. I want to thank everyone in the audience for participating, for listening, for asking the questions today. Lisa Kagan, co-founder of Buddy. Blake Gordon, all the way at the right. He's the general manager of digital trading at Georgia Pacific Recycling. To my right is Geoff Aardsma. He's the VP of market development at AMCS Group. I'm Jennifer Betts, Magnar Metals. If you have any questions, I highly recommend coming up afterwards, making connection, introductions. Again, thank you everyone for participating and coming to our panel today.